You're good to go.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bethany, and welcome everybody that's taken the time to jump online with us. I'm happy to be here. This is a subject that I feel very strongly about and have spent many years researching and training. I have about 40 plus years in social services, working primarily with at-risk youth, families, the Center for Victims of Violence and Crime at Auberly, and before that, several other agencies that have now merged into these very large agencies. And I think that over the last couple of years, through what we've experienced as COVID, so much of what we're going to be talking about in the next, probably have about 40 minutes, is even more pertinent than it was prior to COVID. I know that you all will ask questions in the chat room, and there's some questions you've sent in. I do want you to feel free to ask any question, and if we can't get the answer, I'm going to afterwards research it and get back to you. But this whole thing about fostering growth, resiliency, and well-being in an ever-changing landscape is something that is really challenging and very much challenging to us that are in social services. What I like to do is I like to spend some time in really making sure we understand what terms we're talking about, because my experience has been through the years that we throw all these terms around like trauma, resiliency, well-being. So we're going to talk a little bit about what those terms mean so that we have a shared language. And then we're going to get into a little short brain and body tutorial. So resiliency. This is a term that we use often, and it means something, and it especially means something when we're talking about fostering growth. It's how quickly do we recover from adversity, chronic, and stress? Resiliency is my ability to bounce back. It's my ability to stay calm and in control when faced with changes and challenges. I always think of it as that deep well that you reach down into on those days when you're really struggling. Resiliency helps us to face and overcome barriers caused by adversity, chronic stress, and traumatic experience. And learning new skills and wellness strategies is a way to strengthen and replenish our resiliency. And resiliency helps us to adapt and change. It helps us to handle the challenges that improves our health outcome. And what we've experienced the last couple of years through COVID with just everything that we're getting bombarded by in society and the media and everything, is really calling upon us to be more self-aware of our resiliency, our personal well of resiliency. The other thing I want to talk about, because all of this in my mind goes together, because we can't talk about change and adaptability if we don't understand how the brain works. So we just talked about resiliency. So let's talk about neural pathways. The brain's wiring is created through experiential interaction with this environment. We have to remember that us human beings are built on a very experiential model. How we interact with the world, how we experience the world, is how our brain's wiring happens. So you've heard the expression that neurons that fire together, wire together. Well, with repeated sequences of neurons firing and wiring together, the brain forms neural pathways. And these neural pathways reinforce patterns of responding, behaving, and thinking. And the more they're repeated, the more they reinforce the existing patterns. Now, the brain does not judge what the experience is. It doesn't judge how the neurons are firing together or wiring together. It just is following the experience. So we have to remember that a lot of our neural pathways can be there to support us, to encourage us, to provide predictability, to provide us with access to skills right away, But we have to also remember that it can also be a source of rigidity, of being in a rut, which can produce negative cycles of, cycles of negativity. It can think of the thought of, this is how I've done it. This is how I'm going to do it. I've always done it this way. So these neural pathways, I think of it as a very dense wood in front of me. And there's a very clear-cut path through that woods. And it's my go-to path. It's based on the experiences of my life. It's easily accessible. It's familiar. And if I need to change, I have to be willing to look at other ways that I can create other neural pathways. And I have to walk those new neural pathways. I just can't take one stroll down them. I have to experience them on an ongoing basis. And this is where, when we talk a little bit more about adaptability, is going to come in. So the good news about all this, about my neurons firing together and bouncing around together and creating neural pathways, is the brain can change. What we've learned, what research has proved, it's more plastic and flexible than we ever thought. And so thanks to neuroplasticity, the brain's capable of changing and rewiring based on new experiences and learning. And these new experiences then create new wiring and new neural pathways, which can create and reinforce new patterns of response, habits, and routines. So remember, we're talking about adaptability in an ever-exchanging landscape. Our brain is very central to this. So additional wellness and resiliency building skills can be embraced. That's part of the good news. New ways of coping can be learned, new routines develop. That's part of the good news. The nervous system can heal from chronic stress and adversity with the practice of new resiliency skills and protective factors. Bethany and I were talking earlier before we went live that this information that we are going over, I call it psychoeducation, and I believe it needs to be shared with all of our clients, friends, family members, co-workers. None of this should be a mystery. It should be information that's accessible to everybody. Our brains can change. Adaptability, flexibility, and resilience often calls upon us to try new things, to find a different way of being and handling this bombardment of adversity and stress that we've all been experiencing. And I do believe that this is part of the good news. In social services, we get exposed to, I always say all the nightmares, all the things that aren't going well. That's how most of the people always came on my caseload. It wasn't that they had a good day. But healthy growth and change can occur and have a positive impact on health outcomes. Self-image, self-confidence can improve. The power of hope, positive thoughts, relaxation, the feeling of gratitude can be reinforced. Success can be experienced and goals obtained. Somebody's history does not have to be their destiny. I believe that very strongly, and I believe that neuroplasticity and the way that our brain and bodies work together allows us opportunities to try out new wellness skills, new resiliency building skills that helps us navigate the challenges that we're facing today. So I just want to take a couple minutes on the Brain and Body 101 tutorial. This is really, really basic. I always tell everybody, if you want to be a brain surgeon, please learn more detail. But for the purpose of our talk right now, let's take a few minutes to look at all the moving parts that impact our level of resiliency and ability to adapt to an ever-changing and challenging world. Many of you probably have gone over this. I always think there's, the three major parts of the brain. We have the lower part of the brain, which is tasked with survival, takes its job very, very seriously. And then we have that develops first, because if we don't survive, none of the rest of this tutorial matters. The next part of our brain, the middle part of the brain, is our feelings and emotions. How we're taking in information. Am I happy about this? Am I sad about this? And this primary task of the lower part of the brain watches very closely, because if it's alerted to there's something not safe or highly stressful, it starts to take over more. And then we have the upper part of the brain, the thinking problem-solving brain, our language, our conflict resolution skills, our coping skills. That develops last. And of course, please always remember typical child development runs across all this. So how does the brain take in information and responds to information? We have these 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, and taste. And the brain sorting and analyzing and organizing this information to determine our response. We also have, so we have 3 parts of the brain, the 5 senses, and then we have this nervous system. And of course, on any of these PowerPoints, we could have spent hours and took a deeper dive. But there's 2 parts of our nervous system that happens automatically. The sympathetic nervous system, which keeps us on an alert status. It keeps us awake. Like right now, I'm in my sympathetic nervous system because I'm not going to go to sleep on you. But it's also really gets fired up in emergency situations. If incoming information is threatening, the body brain is put on an alert status, which signals the flight or freeze responses. The lower part of the brain is in control. In the sympathetic nervous system, this is where we're finding, forget about emergencies. This is where we're living most of our lives anymore. There's so much bombardment that we're undergoing, that we're always on this alert status. We're always hearing our email going off on our phone. We're always on watching the news, which is telling us it isn't safe. Nothing's safe anymore. The parasympathetic nervous system is the body at rest. When the incoming information is non-threatening, it reinforces the body to remain in balance and rest. So if with our typical lives right now, that we're being pushed more in our sympathetic nervous system, we have to, if we're talking about resiliency and adaptability, we have to find ways to switch over, to give the sympathetic nervous system a break and spend more time in the parasympathetic nervous system. Because this is where I get a good night's sleep. This is where I digest a meal well. This is where I can relax and be with a family and friends. This is when I can prop my feet up and take a break. So, 2 parts of our nervous system. I also want to go over a couple other definitions, and I'm going to go through this really quick because we want to get into the resiliency building aspect of this. But we talk about risk factors. So, this is important. If you're really going to look at your ability to increase your resiliency, be more flexible and adapting in this world, a risk factor is any factor, condition, or attribute that increases the chances of a negative health outcome. And I define health to include physical, mental, emotional, financial, and spiritual health. You know, I worked for years when people asked me what I did for a living. I'd say, oh, I worked with at-risk youth. You know, I never had to say what they were at risk of. But risk is something, how I think of it, is just has a negative impact on a health outcome. So again, if you're looking at increasing your adaptability and your resiliency, we have to look at risk. Trauma, here's the definition, there's many, but when an experience or collective experience exceeds the person's individual ability to cope with that experience, this is how something is categorized as traumatic. unaddressed, unresolved trauma, ongoing adversity, chronic or toxic stress are potential risk factors. So if you're looking to improve resiliency or helping your clients improve resiliency and adaptability, we just, we can't gloss over the fact that there could be outstanding risk factors that need to be addressed. And one of the major risk outstanding areas is this whole thing of safety. The lower brain is not going to let the rest of us, the rest of our being, learn any new skills, no wellness, no adaptability, if it doesn't feel we're safe. And so there's 5 major types of safety. Dr. Sandra Bloom, who was on the ground, who started the Sanctuary Model Trauma-Informed Care and has written many, many books. Her last book, Restoring Sanctuary, really has the whole model in it. But there's physical, psychological, social, moral, and cultural safety. She just added cultural safety. You have this on your PowerPoint, but these are different areas of safety that have to be addressed in order to move forward learning new stuff. Protective factors. Protective factors. I think of a protective factor as, can you all imagine a really cold, snowy day in Pittsburgh? Well, a protective factor is the warm coat, the gloves, the mittens, the scarf, the hat that protects me as I'm walking through the adversity of my environment. It reduces the impact of risks in families, individuals, and communities. It reduces the harshness of the adverse experience, and it decreases the potential negative health outcomes. So you have risk, protective factors. We've already gone over resiliency. We know about chronic and toxic stress when risk factors overwhelm, and our protective factors and our resiliency factors are not to the level to help negate, reduce the harshness, then trauma, adversity. When I use the word trauma, I think of chronic stress, toxic stress. They all have negative impacts. I really think that if you're sharing this with clients or coworkers, I really think I'm going to ask you not to jump over this part of the tutorial, because I think it actually, what it does is reinforce how important it is. It's not a luxury. It's not optional anymore for us to start looking at resiliency and wellness strategies, because stress produces hormones and chemicals such as cortisol and adrenaline, which we're only meant to experience in short, limited time spurts, not in constant or prolonged states. The constant prolonged states impacts health outcomes. Our body and brain's response to chronic toxic stress is to increase inflammation. And if you study any of this, inflammation decreases the resiliency of our immune system. It's not that inflammation is bad or that chemicals and hormones are bad. It's that we're not meant to live in these 24/7. It impairs cognitive functioning, memory, and mood regulation, and it impacts epigenetics and telomeres, vital to healthy cell reproduction. It also cuts us off from each other. Stress is interesting, that the more stress I feel, the less empathy I feel, the less ability to hear others. And we are social beings. We thrive on interactions with each other. And when we start not to have those quality interactions, our brain starts to act as though there's something missing in life. And it produces more stress for the brain, trying to figure out what's missing. So dealing with risk issues, increasing protective factors, and looking at ways to decrease stress is setting up the foundation for us to increase our resiliency. So or if there's any questions, I'll ask, because what we're going to do is we're going to now, are you ready to apply all this learning to increase your resiliency and adaptability? I really believe that when we apply all this to ourselves and take a personal, deeper dive, self-reflection, that we learn it in such a way that we're better able to describe it, to assist others. So, self-care. Do you believe in self-care? Those of us in the social service arena, I think my experience with the field until just recently is we've really struggled with this, that we're givers, we're, we get paid to help others. If there's nothing left in your well resiliency, there's nothing left to give. So self-care is not self-improvement. That's something else. And self-care is not selfish. Self-care is a practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own well-being, happiness, and health. Wellness is an active process. Okay, I'm going to repeat that. An active process through which an individual makes choices to improve personal health and wellness. And I have this written down several times in this PowerPoint. Go online. There is so much online, different wellness tools. Check them out. But it's an active process. So it's no longer believing in self-care. It's no longer believing in resiliency or believing that this is how my brain and body works. It's behaving as if you believe. It's translating all this into your practical life. So taking care of yourself takes a commitment to stay healthy and engaged. It's no longer, this is my personal and professional opinion, it's no longer optional. And for those of you that are in the health serving fields, it has to be part of your skill development. It has to become part of your worldview on how to navigate the stresses and the adversity that we're facing with, the challenges that our work brings to us. So applying what you know about how the brain and nervous system works, and applying the impacts of risk and protective factors, incorporating the learning from the current brain science, neuroscientific research into your brain and body health to meet the challenges of change. One good book leads to another good book. One really good assessment tool leads to another assessment tool. I use many in the trainings I do, and I know there's many that's used. I do not do direct client service anymore, but I know there's a lot of great tools that are used for working directly with clients and families. Changing up routines or adding to current wellness or resilient building activities stimulates the brain's wiring, which keeps it engaged and healthy. And this is so important. This runs through so much of the current research. The brain has to be engaged. And it has to be challenged at times. Self-care, wellness activities, and strategies strengthen our capacity to achieve our goals and to assist others rather than having the world's problems or others deplete our capacity to live fully. And we're going to now get into a little bit more, and this is something that, if you really want to get a handle on, you're going to have to spend some time in a conversation with you, because it is a conversation between you and you. Self-care begins with self-reflection, which increases self-awareness. Self-inventory of risk, protective factors, stress levels, and health concerns. And this doesn't have to be depressing either. This is an inventory that allows you to say, okay, these are areas I think I need to strengthen. These are areas in which I need to find not the same old rut, the same old neural pathway that's become a rut for me, but ways in which I can create new neural pathways with new options for learning and self-care. What's working? Don't throw out anything that's working. What areas do you seek improvement? better health outcomes. And we can't get into talking about, the rest of this is talking about resiliency strategies, but I want to talk to you about stress a little bit more. Stress, I love this because stress is like kitchen garbage. I produce kitchen garbage every week. And some weeks I have more kitchen garbage than other weeks. And I take it all out once a week. Thursday mornings, they come and pick it up. Some weeks I only have one bag. Some weeks I have 3 or 4 bags. But the weeks I have 3 or 4 bags of garbage, I still take all 3 or 4 out. And my neighbors don't think I'm odd. Boy, she had kitchen garbage last week. She has more this week. Now, if you came into my kitchen right now and my kitchen garbage was piled up through the kitchen, cascading into the dining room and into the living room, you could say to me, Steph, you know, if you take your kitchen garbage out each week, they come pick it up. Because now it's a health issue. It's negatively impacting. So we have to look at stress is part of our modern life. We generate it. And we have to really learn ways to take it out. Just because I took it out last week doesn't mean that I should ignore it this week. And so ways to take your stress out. These, again, sound like we're going to be going through some kind of basic examples, but it's not believing, it's behaving as though you believe that these are ways to interrupt your stress cycle. First of all, breathing. We knew this from a practical perspective, but research, again, has reinforced this. Deep breathing interrupts stress cycles. It supports the parasympathetic nervous system to relax. In order to breathe deeply, our chest and diaphragm muscles have to relax and expand. That doesn't mean that all the things causing me stress are going to go away, but you know what? I can take a break. I can interrupt the cycle, the buildup of my anxiety, my anxiousness, or my stress. This relaxation sends a message to our brain that our body's starting to relax. The brain sends that message out to the body. Again, the body begins to relax more, which then reinforces the message to the brain. So we can take these negative cycles of stress that are constantly being thrown at us and take a break from them. When you start to feel stressed or anxious, again, there are other ways to interrupt the cycle. Because we have to come down from this high level of stress long enough to be able to look at ways in which we can change up what we're doing to create new neural pathways. And so when we go through some of these, I want you to just take notes of what works for you. We have a short little exercise that we're going to do. Stay connected to your positive supports. Stress can distance us. Find ways to stay emotionally connected, even if we're physically, we have to, be apart from each other. And many of us are still apart from each other that we care a lot about. Look to your positive relationships, not to the negative ones in your times of stress. Develop routines that includes all parts of the day, morning, noon, and evenings for all members of the household. COVID threw everything up in the air. Our brain feels the safest when things are predictable. And what we were experiencing, I can't even call it a new normal because I don't even know what the word normal means anymore. And I don't know. It's like the new stresses and the new routines and the new things that we have to adapt to aren't always predictable. And yet we do better The predictabilities of routines in time of high stress and change helps us to calm the nervous system. So in the middle of this chaos, we have to find ways in which we can calm our nervous system. You have to take hold of some of those. I have a little morning routine. Then I have a little early, and I'm not talking about a long amount of time. Then I have a little routine mid-afternoon and one's in the evening that I try to maintain so that there's some predictability to the ever-changing landscape. Limit 24/7 intake of information. Check out information sources that you trust. Listen and watch programming that reduces your stress. Keep your mind focused on a task you're in control of. Have positive images or thoughts to replace and interrupt the negative ones. This is a really quick, I'm looking at the time because I think we have time to do this. And I'm probably going to do it too quick, which isn't going to do it full justice. But these are things that you can do when you start to feel up the stress or your anxiety is increasing. You want to interrupt the cycle. You want to interrupt the tenseness of your body. You want to interrupt the negative thought in your brain. You want to replace it with positive pictures. You want to move and stretch your body. So if you will allow me, this take a couple minutes, and we're just going to run through this. So you're going to stop, take a time out, and stay in the moment. The moment right now. Not what happened yesterday and not what you're worried about tomorrow. Right here and now. It's in the moment that we connect with each other. It's in the moment when our clients realize that we're there for them. So when you feel your stress and your anxiety increasing, here's a quick exercise to interrupt the cycle. Stop, take time out, stay in the moment. Take several deep breaths to calm down, to divert negative or stressful thoughts. If you have a centering prayer or a personal mantra, use it. Think of good thoughts or images. Picture a loved one or a happy place. Think of who or what you're grateful for. And you're breathing through this. And you can be at a meeting and no one knows you're doing this. If you're a personal touchstone or object that helps you focus, use it. A keychain, a medal, piece of jewelry, a ring. This is all you choose. And you're breathing through all this. You're constantly breathing through all this. And then you want to stretch, move, or readjust your body. If you can get up and leave the room, fine. But a lot of times when we get stressed, we can't leave the room. So just standing, sitting, or readjusting your body. This is how your brain, your body, your nervous system can all work together. And you can literally be with a client. You can be in rush hour traffic. You can be with coworkers. You can be in a meeting that's not making you happy. And it's stopping and taking a time out, breathing slowly. Many who practice breathing, they have different breathing, 4 in, 7 out, 8 holds. You can decide all that. The issue is that taking deep breaths shifts the stress in your body. Picturing a good thought or image shifts your mental thoughts. Thinking about a loved one or a happy place starts to bring in positive chemicals and starts to have you feel grateful and happy. It actually changes you up. So I had this PowerPoint, I printed it out and put it on my desk. Because you have to remember your body and mind are connected. If you address one part of yourself, that will have a positive impact on all the others. Choose activities to interrupt stress in a moment and give all the overworked parts of you a break. Fine, this supports your immune system. And again, nobody needs to know you're doing this, or you can tell everyone you're doing this. but it's something that you can incorporate. Sometimes we think with all the stress and adversity that were going on, because it's so complex, and it is, the trauma that we're dealing with is so layered and so complex, but we can start to bring in wellness strategies that aren't that complex, that interrupt what the body, brain, and nervous system's experiencing in the moment. That gives us a chance to breathe. So self-care, fostering growth, resiliency, and well-being in you. Where do you start? Well, you have to start with a conversation between you and you, looking in the mirror. How do you feed your resiliency? Now, remember what we talked about earlier is when you try new ways of self-care, of self-wellness, your brain's starting to connect differently. The neurons are bouncing around differently. And so as we go through some of this, you can say, well, I do some of this. Well, you can also change it up a little bit. What strengthens your resiliency to bounce back? What do you do to give the overworked parts of your body and brain a break? What activities replenish your resiliency? This thing that I'm showing you right now is called a cell phone. I hope you could all see it. I can't quite tell. But we are so consumed by the battery of this thing. Heaven forbid it gets down to 10%. I've seen people run all over a training room just to find a plug to plug something in, to plug this in. Do we know where our personal battery is? And if we do, when we get home or when we're done work, do we prioritize plugging it in as we prioritize this cell phone? That's what I mean about radical self-care. We have to think in these terms now. So some of the things that are wellness related that change up our neurons is mindfulness again, not stuck in the past and not stressing or worrying about the future, but in the moment. Practicing mindfulness can help decrease symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. It also improves mental clarity and sleep. Mindfulness is a type of meditation in which you focus on being intensely aware of what you're sensing and feeling in the moment without judgment or interpretation. It's reconnecting you to yourself. It strengthens your nervous system. Just like ways in which we know a little bit more about how to strengthen our immune system, but we don't think about our nervous systems taking these hits too. Moving. Moving helps to move energy and flow through the body, which brings more oxygen to the cells and muscles. That's why in the little exercise we did, after you do some deep breathing, interrupting the stress in your body, the mental image in your mind, get up and move because it actually moves the tension through your body. When you find yourself sitting too much at your desk, computer, or car, or in front of the TV, get up, stand up, and move. It might seem magical, but it does work. Walking. There's a great book in praise of walking. It's a new scientific exploration, not at the left because they've done all the science on walking. But think of this. We take this for granted. What it takes for us to walk. All the parts are being coordinated. All the minute little neurons that are bouncing off of neurons, the muscles, the nervous system. It's good for our muscles and posture. It requires the body and brain to work intrinsically together to maintain coordinating and balancing all parts of our body. When you walk the next time, be more intentional of what all is going on within you. Walking helps protect and strengthens our organ. With our mind in motion, we think more creatively. Our mood improves. Stress levels fall. And it's a practical exercise. No special equipment. Move. There's other ways to move. And again, when we do these things, dance, like no one or everyone is watching, when it takes the whole body, it looks so easy for us to get up and move and do these things. But it's stimulating our brain to work with our body, to work with our nervous system. You have yoga, Tai Chi, you have different sports, different exercises, anything that gets you moving. Movement and exercise can reduce cortisol levels and blood pressure and decrease anxiety and stress levels. Improve physical flexibility, balance, and core strength. With each of the above, keep on learning new moves. If you learn one dance, learn another dance. If you play a particular instrument, learn a new song. Adaptability has to do with our brain having the neurons bounce together in different ways. Getting out into nature. We came from nature. We've evolved from nature. Being in nature positively correlates with our physical, psychological, and social well-being. It encourages greater physical activities, breathing fresh air, we feel connected, and taking delight in being outside, engaging all your senses. So let's say you walk. You're walking and you have a routine walking. Change up the routine in that you're going to notice things differently. Like I walk along a bike trail with a lot of nature. What I do is I stop and investigate a bug that's on a leaf because it gets my brain engaged in a different way. When something becomes a routine, we think of that as good. And in a way, it's good. But I want to just say, in a way, if it just becomes a rut and there's no new learning, the mind isn't being engaged in different ways. That's where our adaptability comes from. That's where our resiliency and our well-being is challenged in a good way. Therapeutic Bodywork. There's many of these things that you can try. Journaling, writing it down. It's very interesting. Writing it down reinforces a brain circuit. So it completes a brain circuit. So I do a lot of my grocery lists, write them down, and then I forget them. And I go to the store without them. But if I've written them down, I usually can remember them better. Gratitude journaling. We're hearing more and more about this. Reinforce the positive stuff. Your brain will respond. It'll reinforce your brain to think more in gratitude, to think more in joy, to think more in thankfulness. So whether it's a couple notes in the morning, a couple notes at lunch, a couple notes before you go to bed at night. This all creates new neural pathways that reinforce happiness, positiveness. There's lots of brain exercises. Check out the brain exercises online. There's brain IQ. There's a lot of them. But these work. Puzzles, crossword puzzles, learning something new like playing an instrument or a new song. It stimulates eye, hand, and brain coordination, ping pong, throwing, catching a ball, juggling. Bird watching and the identification while outside. In other words, I'm outside a lot, but what am I doing? How am I engaging my brain? Observing and watching the night sky and clouds. These are just things that you can do find where your interest is and start doing new card games, tabletop or board games. And then you keep on increasing the difficulty of a level to push the brain into new learning. The senses are most primal of our senses is scent. So if you're outside or if you're anywhere, if you're into oils, smell them. It stimulates parts of our brain. Being outside, gardening, growing your own. What I'm finding out is a lot of hobbies they're resiliency building. We've just never used those terms. Growing your different herbs, These are fragrances. These are things that the body recognizes right away. Quality nutrition food. There are ways. Reading labels for sugar and fat content. This isn't a lecture. This is pick the healthiest, because all this stuff impacts the nervous system. And there's ways. I always look at salad dressing labels. I like two kinds. The one kind has a lot of stuff and a lot of things on the label I can't pronounce. I don't think that's good. The other salad dressing has basic ingredients, and I like them both. So I take the one that has the basic ingredients. Those are the things you can start doing, because quality nutrition is also one of the essential building blocks. And then we get to restorative sleep. Do you see restorative before sleep? A good night's sleep is key to health and well-being. A good night's sleep is actually a way to plug your own personal battery in. It's a resiliency building activity. And we have to be in that one part of our nervous system. The part of the nervous system, not the part that says, stay awake, stay alert, something's going to happen. We just watched the 6 o'clock news, but there's the 10 o'clock news and there's 11 o'clock news. It has to be in the part of the nervous system that says, relax, rest, digest. Because the restorative part of sleep does reset us. It lets go of the things that our brain doesn't need to make room for the new stuff we're going to experience. And there's lots of stuff on if you have issues with sleep. There's lots of things that you can look up and read. Taking a break, your bedtime routine is important. So, fostering growth and resiliency and well-being. I'm watching the time because I usually do this in 3 hours. So, it looks like we're in pretty good shape. Recharge your personal battery like you do your cell phone. Reset your nervous system. Give it a good break and time off. Turn off the thinking part of you, the worried part of you, the judgment part of you, the processing of the past and the anxiety of the future. Take a break from that. You can always come back to it. Find time to just be in the moment, to just be. The world can wait your return. When you're in that type of a mindset, your brain's willing to try new things. If it thinks it's under stress or under attack, the lower part of the brain shuts everything down, takes control. And that's not the part of the brain, that's not the part of the nervous system that allows us to try new things. That's just survival. I survived yesterday, I'm going to survive today. Where what we want to talk about in adaptability and wellness is I'm going to try new ways. I'm getting bombarded by new things. The stress level's through the roof. The same old is no longer on the level. Here's our stress level, and here's our wellness strategies. These wellness strategies, they weren't bad. It's just that they don't match the level of change that we're going through. And so we have to take our wellness strategies, and they can be very basic, and bring them up to the level of where our stress and adversity exist. So again, you can have this PowerPoint. It gives you some really basic practical examples. And what you want to do is you don't want to people in January join the gym. The gyms are real crowded and then nobody shows up in February because you can't take on all this all at once. You have to do it in small steps. So what resiliency building self-care activities do you already do? How can you enhance the existing practices to stimulate new brain learning and brain engagement? Can you think of ways to strengthen or add additional protective factors? What new resiliency building and self-care activities would you like to try out? There's lots of self-care assessments and tools online. take a look. Actually, with my PowerPoint, I'm asking Bethany to send out one of my favorite ones called the Energy Audit that you all can do. But self-reflection to increase self-awareness has to start there, because I have to make the changes. I have to know my level of stress. I have to figure out when I can fit in ways and times to interrupt that stress. Small changes to existing activities, are what really lasts. Those are the ones that really continue. Because remember, you can't walk a new pathway once. You have to walk it several times. So you just can't say, well, I had a salad yesterday, or I took a walk last week. This is something you're going to have to do more often in order to create a neural pathway. So you're going to make a commitment to yourself. Start the day with small steps. Start your neurons firing to create new wiring with new experiences that help you to handle the changes and unpredictable landscape we find ourselves in today. So, neurons that bounce together, wire together. And when you have them bouncing and wiring together in new ways that supports your immunity, your nervous system, a good night's sleep, that you can start incorporating ways in which you can stop the stress, even if it's just for 5 minutes every once in a while. It brings you back down to, I don't know what the world, I don't know what to say normal. It brings you back down to a lower level of stress. But we are in a time where this change is unbelievable. And we don't know what the new normal is. We don't know what the new typical is. We will get there, but we need to get there with our immune systems and our nervous systems and our brains functioning. So thank you all so much for taking the time out. And Bethany, thank you for your help today. Is there any questions? We only have 5 minutes, and Bethany will send out the PowerPoint and also the energy audit. The energy audit has a picture of a frog jumping out of a pan of water. And the image, the metaphor is that if you put a frog into a cold pot of water, and if you put a frog into a hot pot of water, it jumps out right away. But if you put a frog in a cold pot of water and turn up the heat slowly, it cooks itself. Stress is something that if we're not aware of, it increases without us knowing it to where it's become toxic. We think it's just an ordinary day, but it actually gets to the point where it's way above what is typical. So, thank you.
Thanks.